The 5 most mouth-watering clues that Nintendo Switch Pro excites us. If you didn't get a Nintendo Switch OLED for Christmas, then you might be interested to know about the potentially forthcoming Nintendo Switch Pro, which has been widely reported. As the name suggests, the Nintendo Switch Pro console would likely offer more power than the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch Lite in order to keep the big and competitive against the next-gen might of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox One X. The Switch is easily one of the best consoles ever, both in terms of the really cool hardware and incredible Switch games, and the mere thought of a more high-end model should make any self-respecting gamer happy. But how likely is it? Now, the first thing we need to say that despite multiple reports pointing towards a Nintendo Switch Pro console, Nintendo itself actually came out and said at the time of launching the Switch OLED that it has no plans for launching any other model at this time. However, there have been multiple reports from respected outlets and industry insiders that point to the fact that, while Nintendo may have no plans for launching any other model at this time, that doesn't mean a Switch Pro isn't in the works. After all, what is, at this time, a day, a week, a month, a year? Never. Exactly. Let's find out what has been reported so far about Nintendo Switch Pro to see if anything can be gleaned. 1. Nintendo Switch Pro might be the Nintendo Switch 2 or Super Nintendo Switch. The fact that Nintendo has bolted on first Lite and then OLED onto the end of its Nintendo Switch name has led to Nintendo Switch Pro to gain momentum as the obvious name for any upgraded future console. As has been reported, though, Switch Pro could be simply Nintendo Switch 2, with whispered leaks conflating information. This new Nintendo Switch console might just end up being named the Nintendo Switch 2 or, as has been suggested, the Super Nintendo Switch. The addition of Super would fit with the big NS past naming conventions when it moved from the Nintendo Entertainment System to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Right now, though, nothing is known concretely. Here at Teat3 we'd be very excited for a SNES-themed Super Nintendo Switch Pro. That would definitely be a shut up and take our money situation. The Nintendo Switch Pro is tipped for upgraded internal hardware. One thing all existing reports agree on is that if there is a Nintendo Switch Pro incoming, then it'll feature new internal hardware. Now the original Nintendo Switch, which is coming up to half a decade on the market, comes with a creaking NVIDIA Tegra X1 processor and up to 64 GB of storage. According to its Cyrus M, a well-respected researcher, there is some evidence of a Tegra X1 Plus processor in Nintendo's code, which would likely be faster in almost all ways to this old processor, though, and there's been talk of a NVIDIA Tegra Xavier processor, too. On top of that, it's not unreasonable to assume Nintendo would bump the Switch up to 1080p, although this would impact battery life, and perhaps increase storage to 128 GB, making space for more games and media. Again, though, while much of this makes sense and is exciting to think about, what we know is that nothing is officially confirmed. Nintendo Switch Pro is reported to use that upgraded hardware to play games in 4K. Bloomberg reported a little while ago that Nintendo was sending out developer packs that referenced 4K gaming, although Nintendo said at the time that this was just for testing. There's usually no smoke without fire, however, and 4K would be a sensible Pro step considering that both Xbox and PlayStation offer the functionality. It would be a sensible step for a Nintendo Switch 2 console too, though, and with no concrete information to lean on. What we know is that while 4K makes sense, we don't know if the Big N is going to deliver it. The Nintendo Switch Pro might not use an OLED panel but a mini-LED one. There is also some evidence that Nintendo will use mini-LED technology over OLED in its next console, although we are unsure how realistic this is given that mini-LED is very expensive and the Switch is positioned in the middle market in terms of pricing. It would seem odd if the Switch Pro had a worse screen than the already released Switch OLED, too, so this would only make sense if the mini-LED could match the OLED's performance. From a pricing point of view, though, it could be a way for the Big N to keep pricing down if the Pro system is loaded with more advanced internal hardware. The Nintendo Switch Pro, if released, would not need a new dock, and, if a Switch Pro console is incoming and it does support 4K gaming, then it almost certainly will be while it is in docked mode, as there is simply no way from a price and technical point of view that the Big N would put 4K screens on the Switch Pro. Common sense and, as we will see, leaks suggest 4K output would be delivered in docked mode. And if that is the case, then we already know that the Switch Pro won't need a new dock to deliver it, as the Switch OLED's dock is capable of a 4K output. This means the Big N could sell the Switch Pro dockless, like it sold 3DS XL consoles without a charger, which again could be another way to keep consoles cost down. T3's Nintendo Switch Pro wishlist. The Nintendo Switch is a genuinely incredible console. It's distinctive and unique, setting it aside from the PS5 and Xbox One X. And that's before you even get onto Nintendo's incredible game catalog, easily one of the best in the business. Having said that, would personally love to see 4K, more powerful internals to help developers push the Switch further, better battery life, Bluetooth support, and perhaps even a sturdier build quality or new design. We'll have to wait and see, though, as Nintendo is very secretive. Over time, more rumors will begin to emerge if Nintendo is working on a Switch Pro, so check back to T3 for more details throughout 2022.